Good morning, everyone. I'm San Francisco Mayor London Breed, and I want to thank you all for joining us here today to talk about public safety on a whole nother level in light of the challenges that our city continues to face. You know, this has been a problem that has persisted in this city for some time now. And the fact is, things have gotten worse over time. And I want to take a moment to appreciate our public safety officials that are joining us here today, some of whom you will hear from in a short moment. But thank you to our Police Chief Bill Scott for being here, our Fire Chief Janine Nicholson, our Sheriff Paul Miyamoto, our Director of the Department of Public Health, Dr. Grant Colfax, Director of Emergency Management, Mary Ellen Carroll, and the Director of Homelessness and Supportive Services, Shireen McSpadden, as well as members of the Board of Supervisors who are joining us here today, Supervisor Catherine Stephanie and Supervisor Asha Safai. I'm here to discuss, as I said, public safety in this city. In recent months, we've not only seen a number of high-profile incidents of brazen robberies and car break-ins, but also street behavior and criminal activity, especially in the Tenderloin, that has become far too normal and cannot continue to be tolerated. All of our residents, our workers, and everyone who visits our city should feel safe no matter what part of town they're in. And I know that San Francisco is a compassionate city. We are a city that prides ourselves on second chances and rehabilitation. But we're not a city where anything goes. Our compassion should not be mistaken for weakness or indifference. Today, we're announcing a series of public safety initiatives to create a city that is safe and turns the tide on what we have recently seen in San Francisco. And to be clear, what I'm proposing today and what I will be proposing in the future will make a lot of people uncomfortable. And I don't care. At the end of the day, the safety of the people of San Francisco is the most important thing to me. And we are past the point where what we see is even remotely acceptable. The first of these initiatives is the Tenderloin Emergency Plan, which is already underway. During COVID, we showed what this city can do when we unify our efforts and we work together collaboratively. Through our emergency action, we protected the health of the city, and San Francisco was a national model for addressing COVID. We saved lives. And let me say this, the Tenderloin needs an emergency response, period. I spent a lot of time going to the Tenderloin and seeing what's happening there. During the pandemic, when there were tents everywhere, we intervened, we made a significant difference, but now what I see is far, far worse. Well, there are still issues of needing to get people off the streets and into housing, and there are also very important, urgent safety issues. Last week, I met with a group of families from the Tenderloin. Hearing their stories were hard. Hearing their stories were heartbreaking. Just imagine if you had to walk your kids down the streets of the Tenderloin every single day with people shooting up, selling drugs, and because the sidewalks were so packed with people, you had to walk out onto the street in incoming traffic on a regular basis. You got these brand new playgrounds where you don't even feel comfortable walking your kids to play in them because of everything that they see around them, where you don't feel safe. The PTSD the challenges, the cramped conditions, the nasty streets. And when I say nasty, full of feces and urine that Department of Public Works is cleaning every single day, but it comes back just a few hours later. Last week because it drove home during that meeting the point clearly that we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And every day we let things linger. Our residents are suffering, and we need to be different, to act with urgency, and to be aggressive in countering these problems. And this is why I've directed Mary Ellen Carroll, the Director of Emergency Management, to lead our multi-agency coordination on this effort, bringing the coordination and urgent responses that we brought to COVID this year. In essence, a COVID command that will be a public safety command that will be specifically targeted at the Tenderloin community. And I'm going to have Mary Ellen Carroll walk through the details of what this means. Our priorities are focused on issues of drug dealing, violent crime, public drug use, safe passage and accessibility for the people who live and work there, neighborhood cleanliness, housing resources, emergency medical calls, and we will be tackling illegal vending. In the short term, that means taking immediate and necessary action like fixing the lights, adding additional lighting in very dark areas, dealing with broken trash cans and trash all over the neighborhood. But it also means coordinating with the police and the sheriff's office on felony warrant sweeps, which have led to the arrest of 23 individuals so far with outstanding warrants. These are some of the people who have been holding this neighborhood hostage, and our criminal justice system has a responsibility to hold them accountable. When the police make an arrest, the residents of the Tenderloin should not see that same person back on the streets the next day dealing drugs right in front of their neighborhood. The next stage of this plan will roll out next month and continue for at least 2 months after that. This second stage will continue the progress made earlier on the law enforcement, but also focus on interventions and connections of services to people facing addiction and other challenges. But to be clear, we are not giving people choice anymore. We are not going to just walk by and let someone use in broad daylight on the streets and not give them a choice between going to the location we have identified them or going to jail. This will involve social workers, outreach workers, police, and community groups working together to offer wraparound services and connection to a new temporary linkage site where people can start treatment, meeting people where they are, being the compassionate city that we are, but not tolerating the mess that we've had to tolerate. The final phase of this intervention focuses on keeping the streets safe and accessible for everyone who calls the Tenderloin home. This includes securing long-term funding for ambassador programs, supporting community-led beautification and open space projects, and making environmental changes that promote safety and neighborhood support. This also includes long-term partnerships with community organizations and residents to maintain the improvements made during the crisis operations phase. The key will be to never let the Tenderloin go back to what we are seeing today, to not go backwards, to move forward, to feel and see a difference. But public safety isn't just about the Tenderloin. We know that there are issues all over the city. Our second initiative is targeting the illegal vending on our streets that is incentivizing the break-ins and robberies like the ones we have seen at stores and small businesses throughout the city. And you know what's the sad reality? Before I was even an elected official, when the cell phone thefts were at an all-time high, everybody knew that whatever they stole for cell phones, laptops, anything you steal in this city, you take it down to the Tenderloin, and there's someone waiting to give you cash for those items. I want to be clear that these are not victimless crimes, and they are not just property crimes. We're seeing an increase in the use of high-speed getaway cars that in some cases are stolen vehicles, physical violence, and the use of weapons. Today, I'm introducing legislation to disincentivize theft by making the resale of stolen goods more difficult. For the resale of goods on the streets, it will create an exclusion zone for all street vending activity in existing locations that are highly problematic, such as UN Plaza. It will mandate highly visible posting of approved vendor permits to make it simple and easy for inspectors at any time, and request proof of purchase immediately from anyone attempting to sell these goods. And if they can't produce it, then we will take action. It will allow the Department of Public Works to associate with law enforcement if there is a need to move an individual who's not compliant, and the ability to confiscate goods. These are basic but important actions, and I want to thank Supervisor Safai for co-sponsoring this important legislation. We also know that we need to give our officers more tools to effectively do their jobs. In 2019, the Board of Supervisors passed a law that limited law enforcement's ability to use camera feeds during emergency situations. There are exceptions where they can, but for a lot of the issues like what happened in Union Square, they could not. Where there were multiple robbery crews hitting multiple stores, they couldn't even access those cameras, which is ridiculous. Think about that. During an incident of severe looting, our officers are not able to use a tool that we have that other jurisdictions all over this country can use. This creates barriers for law enforcement's ability to respond quickly when responding to critical incidents and significant public safety issues. We need amendments to clarify that officers are allowed to access these cameras when needed to address critical public safety issues. There is a balance to be had, I know. But right now, if our officers cannot use cameras during a mass looting event, then that policy is out of balance. We are actively working on those amendments with plans to introduce it in January, and my hope is that the board will support changes. Lastly, we're increasingly asking our police department to do more. They're working more overtime to address these challenges, including responding to the rash number of retail thefts and confiscating more than 23 kilos of fentanyl in the last year alone, 4 times the amount in previous years. They've been expanding a number of deployments through our tourism deployment plan, so when people come here and spend money and support our economy, they feel safe and they want to return. And we changed the narrative about what people say about San Francisco, and focusing on auto burglaries to make significant arrests on prolific crews who time and time again are committing these acts and impacting the quality of life for San Franciscans. They've done all of this while being part of a police reform movement that has led to dramatic decreases in the use of force incidents and a rapidly diversifying police force that better reflects the communities they serve. Our officers are committed to doing that work, and they're committed to keeping us safe. But everything they've been doing over the recent months and everything we're going to ask of them in the coming months before we pass a new budget is going to require more overtime funding, and it's going to require more police officers. My budget office is currently working with the San Francisco Police Department and the chief to understand what the needs will be to get us through 2022, and I will introduce a supplemental to ask this board for the resources we need so that the deployment that exists now is not over after the holidays. The deployment that we are imposing in this city needs to be permanent. And as we plan for our upcoming budget, we will ensure those resources, including academy classes and overtime, are in place as part of the 2-year budget, and I will introduce that budget at the end of May, but we can't wait to continue the resources that we have now. Some of these actions are underway immediately, while others require a significant investment and legislation. And there will be more work to come on this front. Taken together, they can make a real difference on our streets and in our city. And before I bring up Chief Scott, I want to take a moment to recognize the work more recently of our police officers and their commitment. Vacations have been canceled, time off has been canceled, it's been all hands on deck. And at the end of the day, what has made the most significant difference to address public safety is, yes, we've made investments in social service programs. Yes, we pushed for reforms to our criminal justice system. We will continue to do that. But when a line is crossed, people have to be held accountable for the crimes they commit in our city. And that's where our police officers have been critically important to our ability to do so. Thank you to Sheriff Miyamoto, who has been a real partner, and I'm looking forward to working more with allowing our sheriff's deputies to work off duty in uniform at a number of locations throughout San Francisco. Their partnership with our frontline workers and community groups and ambassadors have been really essential in keeping us safe. And finally, let me just say, at the end of the day, I know this sounds like a lot of different things. I know this sounds like more and more promises that may not materialize. But I want each and every person in this city to know this work and what we are going to do to turn around how people feel in San Francisco is the most important thing to me. This is a city that has a population of less than 1 million people with an over $12 billion budget. The residents of the city have been extremely generous in providing us with the resources we need to make a difference. And now, the priorities we need to make must be to protect them, must be to turn things around in their neighborhoods. When you are in a room full of people, I would say probably anywhere between 90 and 95% of folks could raise their hand and say that either their car has been broken into, or they've been a victim in some capacity or another. That is not okay. That is not acceptable. And it's time that the reign of criminals who are destroying our city, it is time for it to come to an end. And it comes to an end when we take the steps to be more aggressive with law enforcement, more aggressive with the changes in our policies, and less tolerant of all the bullshit that has destroyed our city. We are going to turn this around, and this is the most important thing for me, and I know leaders of public safety in this city at this time.